You may remember a few years back, there is a huge debate online all centered around a dress. Some people said the dress was blue and black. Other people believed the dress was white and gold. But why such a huge debate? Why so much argument over a dress color? Turns out it was all based on perception. Researchers realized that it depended on how you perceived the lighting in the room. Some people thought that the lighting must be yellow-based, and some people believed the lighting must be blue-based. And because of that, the dress would be a different color based on the lighting in the room. Even if you played around with that concept a little bit more and tilted your screen back and forth as you viewed the dress, you may realize that even just shifting your vision or shifting the screen changed the color of the dress. Keep in mind that human perception is always at work. And since humans always communicate, then perception is always going to connect to communication. In this chapter, we're going to look at the perception process. We're going to look at how perception influences our attributes and influences how we attribute characteristics to other people. We're also going to look at the self-concept. Again, it's connected to our perception and how perception influences our face work. So let's get started. If you remember from past videos, this is the transactional model, showing a sender and receiver sending a message and receiving a message from another sender and receiver. Now, I mentioned before that this lighter green is a frame of reference. Think of that as perception. This is each person's own view of how the world works. Our goal in communication is to have shared meaning. That's something about how you perceive things and about how I perceive things has some overlap in that darker green color. So when we look at the perception process as a whole, think of perception as how we establish meaning in our worlds. Even though perception seems so simple and so easy, it has its own process that unfolds in 3 distinct stages. Stage 1 is selection. In this stage, you select available data, usually through one of your 5 senses. You either see something, you smell something, you taste something, you hear something, or you feel something. After you've noticed that stimuli, after you've selected it, then you organize. In the organization step, you organize the available data into usable forms. In some ways, you're trying to classify this new stimuli or this interesting, unique thing based on what you already know. We'll talk more about that later. And then lastly, interpretation, adding meaning. So now that I've experienced this thing, I've tried to organize it based on former categories in my head, you add meaning. Let's look at the perception process at work. Remember, perception happens like that. What do you see here? For some of you, you may see a man. Here's the man's head. Here's the arms. We're seeing the back of this man wearing some large jacket or parka. Here are his legs, and here are his shoes. He's looking into a cave, maybe calling out into it. For others, maybe the first thing you saw was the face. Here's the eye, here's the nose, here's the mouth, here's the very strong jawline, the ear, the neck, and then the man's hair. This is a visual illusion. You're meant to see 2 different images at 2 different times, but there's probably one that stood out to you first. How about this picture? Find the arrow in the FedEx logo. Some people find it right away. Some people need a little bit more time. Some people need you to point it out to them. So here we have the arrow. It's created by this blank space between the capital E and the lowercase x. This was actually intentional on the case of FedEx. They wanted you to mentally associate FedEx with movement, hence the arrow. Let's go back to the perception process. I mentioned that in selection, you notice something. One of your 5 senses is stimulated. So maybe you're stimulated by something that's unique and unusual. So you're walking down the street and you notice a fluffy dog. But this fluffy dog isn't like all the other fluffy dogs. This fluffy dog has purple fur. Of course, just being so unique and unusual, you notice it. It stands out because it's not like the others. Sometimes we notice things based on how mundane things are just repeated. So if someone wears the same shirt every single time you see them, your brain is going to pick up on that and go, oh, didn't they wear that same shirt yesterday? And the day before? And the day before that? Again, selection at work. And even intense experiences. So there have been times where you've probably had your senses heightened. Maybe something was smelling in the room. And you realize, oh my gosh, that's smoke. Smoke usually means fire. And because of that smell, that selection process, you were able to react. Or maybe you saw something shocking that you never wanted to see. And that caused an intense experience as well. But because it was so shocking, you couldn't even look away. You just were glued to it. So after you've selected something in your environment, whether it be because it's unique and unusual, or because it's something mundane that you see repeatedly, or because it's an intense experience, you start to organize. When you start to classify something and try to determine what you already know about it versus what you don't already know about it, that categorization of that stimuli is called organization. When doing this, we employ mental frameworks called schemas. And we use our schemas to try to figure out, well, how does this connect to things we know in the past, to things that we don't know, that we have not experienced. Sometimes we try to complete the picture, if that makes sense. Sometimes we use closure. Based on other things that you see in this picture, you would interpret that, hey, she must be drawing another oval. That could be a finished drawing right there, but your brain goes ahead and closes the image. Proximity is another way which we organize. If 2 things are sitting next to each other, you're probably going to assume that they must be related in some way. Usually I can use this particular schema, proximity, to figure out who's dating or who's best friends in classes, because they usually sit closer to each other. And then there's similarity. So let's say everyone in your class shows up in a black t-shirt, and you're the only person who hasn't shown up in a black t-shirt. Well, someone walking by would assume everybody wearing a black t-shirt must be connected somehow. Maybe they're in the same organization, or maybe it's a signal that they're all friends. Maybe the person not wearing a black t-shirt is not in the group, or maybe they just missed the memo. Now there's a good chance that everyone just happened to wear black that day. A really large chance, but hey, it could happen. But based on the similarity, everyone wearing a black t-shirt, people would automatically start to assume, well, that must be what this is. Everyone's a part of some larger group. Now there are other schemas that we also use to help categorize. These 4 schemas that you see here are categorized around people. So think about the physical. Is this person a man or a woman? Is this person tall? Is this person older or younger? Does this person have red hair or dark hair. Then you have roles. Is this person a friend, a coworker, a family member? Then you even have the interactive constructs that we could do. How is this person behaving as they interact with you? I do remember one time someone got a little too close to me. I did not know this person. They were a complete stranger. The role constructs in this situation were I was a retail employee and this was a customer. The customer got very close to me. I didn't like it, so I got out of there as soon as possible. But again, based on the role constructs, based on the interactive constructs, my assumption was this person doesn't know boundaries. Then there's even psychological constructs. So, is that other person in a good mood? Is the person not in a good mood? Are they interested? Do they seem responsive to what I'm having to tell them? All those are going to be a part of our schemas that we use. And the last stage of the perception process is interpretation. This final step occurs when we assign meaning to an experience or a person. It is here when we interpret stimuli that we likely see the most differences across people, because they're going to assign that different significance based on the following. Maybe their past experiences. So, one time, I was home with my mom and dad, and I found a honey bun. Now, I normally don't eat these, but I was hungry, and they had them laying around. Why not? From my childhood, I remember how much I liked these. So I wasn't too upset about eating this instead of eating something maybe a little bit healthier. Well, about 1 minute into eating this honey bun, I realized, uh-oh, this isn't fresh anymore. It's gone bad. Even though the expiration date was 2 to 3 months still in the future, obviously the honey bun missed that memo, because it was definitely not good anymore. Ever since that experience, I have not been able to look at honey buns in the same way. For some weird reason, even though I know, hey, honey buns are good, I've had them before in the past, my brain cannot switch back over. Sometimes the opinions of others can influence our interpretation as well. Have you ever talked to someone and said, oh, well, don't trust person X, they're a bad person. And because of that opinion, because of that gossip, you started to see that person as a bad person too. One day, you walk up to the copier, and there they are, taking up all of the copier paper. Of course they would. They are the horrible person that has to take up all the copier paper from you. And maybe they just have a lot to print that day. Maybe they're not a bad person. Maybe they're not trying to make your day horrible. They just have a lot to print. But because of that opinion that you heard, you already see them in a negative light. Sometimes our own ideologies can affect how we interpret things. Because remember, our ideologies are a set of ideas about the way the world should work. So for example, if you think that bugs are gross and you should never eat a bug, then you may be a little grossed out when you see someone else eating a bug as a delicacy. Because in your ideology, no one eats bugs, that's gross. And even sometimes the degree to which we identify with other people can influence our interpretation. When I first met my friend Terry, I was shocked by how alike we really are. But I always have to remember that we're not exactly the same. There are some incidents where we're going to behave differently. And so I can't just assume, hey, Terry's going to act the same way I would in this situation. I can't just interpret the things that I would do to be what she would do. So now I hope you have a better understanding of the perception process at work. Yes, it takes seconds, even less than seconds, to form an opinion. But keep in mind how complicated that process can be, because it's selection, organization, and interpretation.